Shut your mouth and don't interfere in men's business. My husband was assembling a sofa for his brother in our bedroom and threw my things into the hallway. The men's business ended when my mother entered the apartment. Katia saw Pasha for the first time at a company party. He was setting up the sound equipment and kept joking with his colleagues. At that moment, she thought, what an open person, look how he shakes hands. Later, they exchanged phone numbers, walked along the pier, and had a date at a cafe where the waiter spilled hot tea on her, and Pasha immediately gave her his shirt, staying in just a t-shirt. With this one, I won't get lost, Katia thought. They married 6 months later, a simple wedding, just close family. Katia's mother, Elena Petrovna, a retired military doctor, watched her son-in-law with a slight smile but approved of her daughter's choice. The main thing is that he respects you. The rest will follow, she said. At the time, Pasha made a good impression on his mother-in-law, polite, hard-working, with an open smile. After the wedding, the young couple lived in a rented apartment, a small studio on the outskirts of the city. Katia worked as an accountant, and Pasha took part-time jobs at an event agency. They had to save money, but there was never enough. Half the salary went to rent. We'll make it work, Pasha said softly, touching Katia's shoulder as she divided the household budget into envelopes. I've got 2 loans myself, and I'm still here. Katia didn't like Pasha's older brother, Koka. He was loud, messy, and always borrowing money from his brother, never paying it back. Family comes first, Pasha would repeat, handing Koka his last 1,000. The day Elena Petrovna called and asked Katia to come over, she wasn't expecting anything special. Maybe another talk about children, her mother always asked when they'd give her grandchildren or just invited her over for tea and pastries. I've decided to move to the countryside, Elena Petrovna announced, pouring tea. This city has worn me out. I want peace and a tomato patch. I bought a house by the lake. That's great, Mom. Katia said cautiously. And the apartment? And the apartment? Elena Petrovna repeated, tapping her knuckles against the cup. I'm leaving it to you. You need it more. Katia froze, the cup halfway to her lips. Her mother's studio, in a good neighborhood, fully renovated and furnished, it was a stroke of luck. Mom, are you serious? But how? How? I'm not so old that I'll leave my property in a will. We'll draw up the deed of gift, and you'll live well. Just respect my work, and each other. When Katia told her husband the news, Pasha spun her around the room. This is our luck. We can switch to a more interesting job or do some renovations. Of course, with the renovations, we'll have to wait. Katia laughed. But we still have to work either way. A month later, they moved into her mother's apartment, a bright studio with high ceilings and old but solid repairs. At first, Pasha made an effort, helping with the cleaning and even washing dishes without being reminded. Katia lovingly arranged their home, hanging her dresses in the closet and carefully placing her makeup on the dressing table her grandmother had left her. Elena Petrovna called periodically to check in on them but rarely visited. I don't want to intrude on your married life. The move to the new home didn't just bring changes to their living situation. Elena Petrovna used her connections, and Pasha was hired as a technical director at a major event planning company. His salary tripled, and new opportunities opened up. See? Everything's working out, Katia would say when they sat on the small balcony in the evenings, drinking wine. Our own place, a good job. Yeah, your mother helped us a lot, Pasha replied, though his tone was tight. Even if it feels a little strange using connections. Why is it strange? You're an excellent specialist. Yeah, but everyone there knows I'm Elena Petrovna's son-in-law. This remark annoyed Katia, but she said nothing. Gradually, she noticed Pasha pulling away, coming home later from work, sharing less about his day, and spending more time on the phone. By the end of their first year in the new apartment, their shared dinners had become rare. Pasha was always disappearing into important meetings or company parties. Then he started talking more about his brother. Guess what? Kolya and Dasha split up, he said one evening. Sorry to hear that, Katya replied half-heartedly, stirring pasta sauce. And he got fired from his job, Pasha continued, watching his wife's reaction. Now what? Well, he's looking for another job. It's temporary, you know. Something pleading flashed in her husband's eyes, and Katya tensed. I hope he finds something, she said flatly. The following week, Pasha brought up his brother more often in conversation. Kolya's calls came several times a day. Sometimes, Pasha would go to the kitchen to talk in private. Katya tried not to pay attention, but unease grew inside her. One Saturday morning over breakfast, Pasha casually remarked, Listen, we actually have plenty of space. The bedroom's big, the living room. What are you getting at? Katya set down her fork. Kolya has nowhere to stay. Maybe he could live with us for a while. Just a couple of weeks, until he finds a job in a new place. We have a one-bedroom apartment, Pasha. Where will he sleep? But we can put a sofa and a book in the living room. Mom has an old but sturdy one. Katya felt something stir inside her. This isn't a living room, Pasha. It's our only room, besides the kitchen. But what does it matter? There's a bedroom and a living room there, he said, downplaying it. I don't want your brother living with us, Katya said firmly. He has his mother, at the end of the day. His mother lives in another city, you know that. Pasha's face darkened. I thought you'd understand. He's also my family. And I'm your family too. And this is my house, by the way. That argument worked like a trigger. Pasha suddenly got up from the table. Ah, your house. Of course, how could I forget? Everything here is yours, and I'm just a piece of furniture. He slammed the door so hard that a framed photo fell off the shelf. Their wedding photo. The glass cracked right between the figures of the bride and groom. After that conversation, Pasha seemed to have gone quiet. He didn't mention his brother, was cautious, even started the tradition of bringing Katya her favorite pastries on Fridays. She almost believed the issue was closed. But on Wednesday at work, an important meeting was cancelled, and Katya decided to leave early. When she opened the door with her key, she heard noise and male voices in the house. Her heart skipped a beat. Walking inside, Katya froze in the doorway. Her entryway, always immaculate, now looked like a battlefield. On the floor was a coat she usually hung on a hook near the door. All her wardrobe had been pulled out of the built-in closet. The blouses, skirts, and dresses she had carefully hung were now piled on the hallway floor like useless trash. Her favorite black dress, bought with her first paycheck, was thrown lifelessly onto the shoe rack. What? Katya murmured, stepping forward. In the only room that served as both bedroom and living space, something unbelievable was happening. In the center of the room stood a large, old sofa. A shapeless structure of worn-out, dirty brown velvet, with sunken seats and springs poking out. Next to the sofa, red-faced and sweaty, stood Pasha, and across from him, his brother Kolya, a big man with a receding hairline and 3-day stubble. Katya! Pasha exclaimed, clearly surprised to see his wife so early. What are you doing here? Katya didn't answer. Her gaze stopped at the vanity table, a small, elegant piece left to her by her grandmother. All her makeup, perfumes, and jewelry boxes were haphazardly stuffed into a shoebox on the floor. In the now empty space sat a man's suitcase. What's going on here? Katya's voice sounded unexpectedly low and hoarse. Isn't it obvious? Kolya replied with a smile. I'm moving in. Didn't Pasha tell you? The brothers exchanged glances. Pasha shrugged nervously. I was just about to tell you. Kolya has nowhere to go. He'll live here for a while until he gets back on his feet. You know I'm against this, Katia said quietly but firmly. We talked about this. Come on, family, Kolya said, sitting on the sofa and stretching his legs. You'll barely even notice I'm here. What, the third one interjected. Have you never lived in a commune? I don't want him living here. Katia looked directly at her husband, ignoring Kolya. This is my home, and I didn't give permission. Here we go again. Pasha rolled his eyes. Your house, your rules. And what about me? Don't I get a say? We're husband and wife. We both live here. I have nothing against your friends or your brother as guests, but living here. Exactly, Pasha interrupted, his voice rising higher than usual. We're husband and wife, and I have the right to decide who lives in our apartment. Kolya watched the argument with obvious pleasure, smiling and shaking his head. Women, he said philosophically. They always put up a fight first, then give in eventually. This remark, delivered with disdain and condescension, finally pushed Katia over the edge. I'm not just some abstract woman. Her voice trembled. I own this apartment, and I don't want you living here. Why do both of you act like my opinion doesn't matter? And here we go. Kolya sighed and nodded at his brother. Come on, calm your little princess down, or we won't get this sofa set up by tonight. Pasha closed his eyes and took a deep breath, clearly trying to keep his composure. Katia, listen, he tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. Kolya's in trouble. He has no place to stay, no job. He needs help. Can't we make some room? We could have discussed this with me first, Katia said softly, before throwing my things around and bringing in this horrible sofa. Hey, the sofa's fine. Kolya protested. I've slept on it since I was 16, whenever I visit Mom. I didn't throw anything, Pasha continued to defend. I just moved things a little. And anyway, I was going to put everything back. After setting down the sofa, Katia crossed her arms. Pasha, we live in a studio. There's no space for a third person. There's plenty of space. Kolya couldn't hold back. 5 people live in studios all the time, no problem. You, Katerina, just got too used to your little apartment. Want everything to be just like a queen's. Kolya, stay out of it, Pasha grumbled, but without much conviction. And what about her? Kolya wouldn't back down. Wants to help her brother. She's angry. Sound familiar, huh? Just talks a big game about family values. But in practice? Shut your mouth, Katia said flatly, staring him straight in the eye. This is none of your business, what happens between me and my husband. Wow. Kolya gaped and raised his eyebrows. What a temper, bro. You're under the thumb of this fury. Did you know that? Katia turned her gaze to Pasha. She expected him to step in, to scold his brother, to say something in her defense. But her husband only smiled uncomfortably, shrugged, and muttered, yeah, sure. What? Katia raised her hand. Pasha, tell me the truth, do you really want Kolya to live with us? Yes, Pasha answered unexpectedly, firmly. He's my brother, and I won't abandon him. And my opinion doesn't matter to you? Of course it matters, Pasha raised his voice. But this is temporary. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Kolya gave up. See? Women always blow things out of proportion. Something shifted in Katia. A cold calm spread through her veins. Slowly, she scanned the wrecked room, the scattered belongings, Kolya's mocking grin, Pasha looking lost. Fine. Her voice sounded eerily calm. I understand everything I needed to. Pasha blinked, confused. So, you agree? No. Katia shook her head. But I've realized that my feelings matter less to you than your brother's whims. What do you mean, whims? Pasha bristled. He has nowhere to live. He has a mother, friends, rental options. But you didn't even ask before turning this place into a mess. Oh, come on, don't exaggerate. Pasha tried to put an arm around her shoulders, but Katia pulled away. A little mess, so what? At least we're helping someone. You know what? Katia strode decisively to her purse. I'm not arguing with the two of you. Do whatever you want. Now that's the right attitude. Kolya cheered. See, Pasha. Women always give in if you show some backbone. Katia pulled out her phone and silently dialed a number. The brothers exchanged glances. Who are you calling? Pasha frowned. Mom, Katia replied coolly. Pasha paled. Why drag her into this? We can handle it ourselves. Sorry, but it doesn't seem like we can. Katia pressed the phone to her ear. I need help. Pasha moved toward her. Give it to me. No need to bother Mom over nonsense. This isn't nonsense, Pasha. Katia stepped back toward the door. You've made it clear you don't respect me or my home. Women. Kolya scoffed. Always hiding behind Mama when they run out of arguments. Come on, Pasha, show her who's in charge here. Something dark flashed in Pasha's eyes. He took a decisive step forward, roughly grabbing Katia's wrist. Give it here and shut your mouth. Stay out of men's business. Katia froze, stunned. In 5 years of marriage, Pasha had never spoken to her like that, let alone grabbed her. From the phone, Elena Petrovna's voice crackled to life. Katia, what happened? Katia's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away. Mom, can you come? I'm on my way. Her mother's voice held no surprise or questions. What's going on? Pasha has decided to live here with his brother without my consent. Understood, Elena Petrovna replied dryly. I'll be there in an hour. Pasha let go of Katia's hand and took a step back. And what for? Resentment tinged his voice. What are you trying to do? Simply justice, Katia answered. What a scare. Kolya laughed. The mother-in-law is coming. What will she do? Give us the finger. Pasha didn't back his brother up. He had known Elena Petrovna for a long time and, unlike Kolya, he knew this wouldn't end so easily. The next hour passed in tense silence. Kolya continued fixing the sofa, deliberately ignoring Katia. Pasha moved between them, trying to calm his wife and help his brother. Katia sat in a chair by the window and didn't say a word, staring blankly at one spot. When the doorbell rang, everyone jumped. Come in. Katia called out. Elena Petrovna entered the apartment, a small, thin woman with a military bearing. Despite her short stature, she filled the entire hallway space. Casting a glance at the mess in the corridor, she silently walked into the room and stood in the doorway, assessing the situation. Her gaze swept over the disassembled sofa, the disheveled men, and her daughter, motionless in the chair. A heavy silence settled in the air. Finally, Elena Petrovna spoke. It's been 53 minutes since my call. Pavel, explain what's happening here. Pasha swallowed nervously. Behind him, Kolya gave him a thumbs up, as if cheering him on. But this only worsened Pasha's mood. Elena Petrovna, he began, trying to sound confident, Kolya and I decided he should stay with us temporarily, until he finds a job. Kolya and I decided, Elena Petrovna interrupted, raising an eyebrow. And what did Katia decide? I'm against it, Katia said softly but firmly. But Pasha said this is a matter for men and that I should keep quiet. A shadow crossed Elena Petrovna's face. So it's a matter for men, is it? Understood. Kolya stepped forward. Elena Petrovna, stay out of our business. Kolya and I will handle it ourselves. Ours? The older woman asked with a dangerous smile. What exactly am I not supposed to interfere in? There was a pause. Pasha couldn't take it anymore. Elena Petrovna, Kolya got into some trouble. He's my brother, I have to help him. Elena Petrovna nodded approvingly. But does this help involve my daughter's belongings being thrown on the floor and her feelings trampled? I would have cleaned it up later, Pasha snapped after installing his brother in his daughter's apartment without her consent. It's our apartment, Kolya interjected. They're husband and wife. Elena Petrovna slowly turned toward him. First of all, young man, this is not your apartment. It is my daughter's apartment, which I gave her as a gift. I worked for 30 years to buy it. And I don't recall your name appearing on the deed of gift. Kolya opened his mouth but could not find the words. Furthermore, Elena Petrovna continued, turning her gaze toward her son-in-law, I helped you find a job, Pavel. Do you remember? I interceded with Maxim Igorevich, and you were hired for a good position with a salary you couldn't even dream of. Pasha grew even paler. This isn't fair, he muttered. You're using your position to pressure me. It's not right. Elena Petrovna's voice remained calm but took on a steely tone. Do you know what's unfair? Disrespecting your wife, being rude, trying to impose your decisions while ignoring her feelings. I just wanted to help my brother, Pasha nearly shouted. Help him, then, Elena Petrovna cut in. Rent an apartment for him. Lend him money. Find him a job, but not at the expense of my daughter's comfort and dignity. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the men's heavy breathing. Kolya shifted from foot to foot, clearly unsure what to do. You have 15 minutes, Elena Petrovna said, glancing at her watch, to disassemble that sofa and get it out of here. And if we refuse? Kolya challenged. Elena Petrovna smiled thinly. Then tomorrow, Pavel won't have a job. One call to Maxim Igorevich, and that's it. You wouldn't dare, Pasha exclaimed. Believe me, Pavel, I would. There is nothing more important to me than my daughter's happiness. The men exchanged glances. Their expressions were marked by desperation and helplessness. Do you realize this is blackmail? Pasha said quietly. No, Elena Petrovna shook her head. These are the consequences of your actions. 14 minutes. The silence that filled the room felt almost tangible. Elena Petrovna stood in the doorway, arms crossed over her chest, small yet unyielding, like a granite boulder. Her presence electrified the air. 13 minutes, she said, checking her wristwatch. Pasha and Kolya exchanged bewildered looks. Kolya's eyes burned with indignation mixed with fear. Pasha looked as if he had been punched in the gut. Fine, Pasha relented, rubbing his forehead. Kolya, let's take this apart. Seriously? Kolya bristled. Just like that? What do you suggest? Pasha growled. That I get fired tomorrow. Kolya snorted but bent down toward the sofa. The men began unscrewing the bolts that held together the heavy frame. They worked in silence, exchanging only brief phrases. Katie watched from her armchair, feeling a strange paralysis. Elena Petrovna sat on the edge of the chair by the desk, her gaze never leaving the men. Her dry fingers tapped rhythmically on the armrest. Rat-tat-tat, rat-tat-tat, like an invisible metronome. 11 minutes, she said firmly. Yes, we understood. Kolya couldn't take it anymore. Stop counting already. I'm simply reminding you that time passes, Elena Petrovna replied calmly. And my conditions remain unchanged. Kolya muttered something obscene under his breath. Pasha shot him a warning look. Elena Petrovna stood and walked over to Katie's scattered belongings. Don't touch, she said firmly when Pasha reached out to help. You handle the sofa. And Katie's things, we'll take care of those ourselves. She carefully picked up her daughter's black dress, smoothed it out, and hung it on the rack. Do you remember how we chose it? She asked softly, running her fingers over the fabric. You tried on a dozen dresses, but settled on this one. I remember. Katie smiled weakly. I spent my first paycheck on it. Worth every penny, Elena Petrovna nodded. It flatters your figure. This quiet conversation about the dress, spoken softly amid the rising tension, sounded almost surreal. Kolya rolled his eyes but stayed silent, watching as mother and daughter exchanged understanding glances. 9 minutes, Elena Petrovna noted as she hung the dress in the closet. Yeah, we got it, Kolya snapped, tightening a screw forcefully. You're pushing it, Kolya, don't overstep, Pasha growled. Elena Petrovna continued unpacking Katie's belongings, hanging them neatly in the closet, her composure unshaken. Her movements were precise and efficient, clearly military trained. Suddenly, she turned to her son-in-law. Do you know how much this apartment costs at current market rates? Pasha froze, wrench still in hand. No, I haven't thought about it. About 15 million, Elena Petrovna replied smoothly. And that's a modest estimate. Good neighborhood, excellent transit, park nearby. Pasha swallowed hard. What's your point? My point is, I didn't just give my daughter a roof over her head, I gave her financial stability, Elena Petrovna explained as she hung another blouse in the closet. Her security. Her future. I gave her the most valuable thing I had. I understand. But you don't, Elena Petrovna interrupted gently. Otherwise, you wouldn't let your brother take over your apartment and disrupt your lives. Kolya scoffed. What's the matter? Think we threw something out or broke it? Elena Petrovna turned slowly toward him. It's not about the things, young man. It's about respect. And respect for family ties, Kolya shot back. Brothers help each other. Without a doubt, Elena Petrovna agreed. But not at someone else's expense. And certainly not at the expense of the woman you promised to love and protect. Pasha visibly blushed. He put down the wrench and rubbed his neck. Elena Petrovna began in a conciliatory tone. I admit I acted improperly. But I genuinely wanted to help. Kolya is my brother, you understand? I understand, nodded her mother-in-law. I also have a younger sister, but that doesn't give me the right to handle someone else's property or ignore their feelings. 7 minutes, said Katya, glancing at the clock. The men quickened their pace. The sofa was already half dismantled. The 70s-era structure turned out to be surprisingly complicated. Sweat ran down Pasha's face, while Kolya panted, struggling with the rusted parts. Darling, could you help me with your cosmetics? Asked Elena Petrovna, pointing to the cardboard box on the floor. Katya nodded and knelt beside the box. Mother and daughter began returning the perfume bottles, cream jars, and jewelry cases to the dresser. Their deliberate movements contrasted with the men's frantic bustle. Did Pasha give you these perfumes for your anniversary? Asked Elena Petrovna, pointing to the elegant bottle. Yes, for the third one, replied Katya. I've been wanting them for a while. He has good taste, Elena Petrovna remarked approvingly. Pasha is attentive when he wants to be. Pasha shot them a quick glance but said nothing, focusing on the sofa. 5 minutes, said Elena Petrovna. What the hell? Kolya exclaimed as the wrench slipped and hit his finger. Pasha, this wreck is all rusted. Shut up. Pasha hissed. Come on, let's finish this. Elena Petrovna and Katya finished with the cosmetics and now moved to sorting clothes in the hallway. The mother whispered short phrases to her daughter, who responded with a faint smile. Suddenly, Katya called out to her husband. Pasha, forgive me. Of course, I didn't mean to upset you. Katya looked up at him. For a moment, she thought she saw genuine remorse in his eyes. I'm sorry, she replied quietly. But that doesn't change what you did. I know, Pasha sighed. But I didn't think you'd get so sad. Really? Katya arched her eyebrows. You threw out my things, brought in that hideous sofa, and wanted to move your brother into our only room, and you didn't think I'd be sad. Pasha hung his head in shame. Ah, forget it, Pasha, Kolya interjected. Women always exaggerate. Hysterical today, sweet as silk tomorrow. Nikolai, Elena Petrovna's voice suddenly cut in sharply. I recommend you watch your language in front of my daughter. Or what? Kolya shot back. You'll fire me too. I've already been fired, in case you didn't know. No, Elena Petrovna replied calmly. But I can call your mother. As I recall, Tamara Ivanovna is a woman of strict principles. Kolya paled. Don't call my mother. Then behave decently, Elena Petrovna said firmly. And hurry up. 3 minutes. The men doubled their efforts. The couch was almost dismantled. Only the final details remained, unscrewing the last screws and separating the seat from the armrests. Where do you work, Elena Petrovna? Kolya suddenly asked. I'm a retired military surgeon, she replied. Now I consult on clinic management. What's your connection to Pasha's job? Kolya pressed. How can you fire him? Elena Petrovna simply answered, Maxim Igorovich Somen, the director of the company where Pasha works, is a friend of mine and a former patient. I just answered him. I saved him in Chechnya. We still keep in touch. Kolya whistled. Wow, connections. Connections have to be earned, Elena Petrovna shrugged. 1 minute. Pasha unscrewed the last bolt, and the couch completely came apart into its pieces. All done, he said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Where do we take it now? Back where you brought it from, Elena Petrovna replied. Your car, I assume. I don't have a car, Kolya grumbled. We'll take a taxi. Then call a taxi, Elena Petrovna shrugged. Or a cargo cab. It'll probably cost a fortune, Kolya complained. Not my problem, Elena Petrovna said. You brought this couch here, you take it out. Pasha pulled out his phone and began scrolling through his contacts. I know a guy with a van, he muttered. Maybe he can help. Perfect, Elena Petrovna nodded. While you wait, you can carry the couch pieces down to the first floor. From the 6th to the 1st. Kolya groaned. This thing is heavy. The elevator works, Elena Petrovna shrugged. Besides, as I recall, you insisted this was men's work. Pasha shot his mother-in-law a brief glance, filled with helpless fury, but said nothing. Instead, he bent down and lifted one of the couch's armrests. Come on, Kolya, let's take everything down. The next 20 minutes passed in an exhausting effort to haul the couch pieces down to the entrance. Pasha and Kolya carried the heavy parts. The elevator groaned under the strain. Neighbors peered out from their apartments in surprise. Elena Petrovna watched the process from the doorway while Katya finished cleaning the room. You know, Elena Petrovna said quietly, turning to her daughter, my father, your grandfather, always used to say, respect can't be bought, but it can easily be lost. What do you mean, Mom? Katya picked up small objects from the floor that had fallen from clothing pockets. I mean your husband lost respect today, Elena Petrovna sighed. And that's bad for both of you. He chose his brother, not me, Katya replied softly. That's his choice. Yes, Elena Petrovna nodded. But the question is, are you prepared to accept the consequences of that choice? Katya continued cleaning in silence. Her face appeared calm, but her eyes held back unshed tears. Finally, the doorbell rang. At the door stood a man in work clothes. Victor, he introduced himself. Pasha called. Said the sofa needs to be moved. Yes, thank you for coming so quickly, said Elena Petrovna. The pieces are already downstairs. Victor nodded and left. After a few minutes, Pasha and Kolya returned, sweaty and red-faced. Done, Pasha exhaled. Victor took the sofa. He'll deliver it to Mom's place. Perfect, Elena Petrovna nodded. So, the incident is resolved. Great, Pasha forced a smile. Then Kolya and I will go to the cafe, grab something to eat, and later we'll come back and discuss everything. Agreed. Elena Petrovna exchanged a glance with her daughter. Katya gave an almost imperceptible nod. No, Pavel, Elena Petrovna said softly but firmly. I don't think that's a good idea. What? Pasha frowned. We've resolved the sofa issue. Resolved? Elena Petrovna nodded. But not the issue of trust and respect. I apologized. Pasha exclaimed. What more do you want? It's not just about apologies, Katya spoke up for the first time in a long while. I need time, Pasha. Time to think about whether we can keep living together. A heavy silence fell. Pasha's face twisted with surprise and offense. Are you serious? Over a stupid sofa? No, Pasha, Katya replied wearily. Not because of the sofa, because of your attitude. Because you chose your brother over me. Because you told me to shut up and stay out of men's business. You're blowing this out of proportion. Pasha waved his hands. I just made a mistake. Maybe. Katya shrugged. But I need time to figure out how seriously I can take that. Pasha looked at his wife, then at his mother-in-law, searching for support. But Elena Petrovna only shook her head. She's right. Pavel, you both need time. But where am I supposed to go? Pasha asked, bewildered. You were going to help your brother, Katya shrugged. Well, go help him. Live together. Think about the future. Yeah, but we'll be living at Mom's place, in a tiny apartment on the outskirts. That's no way to live. That means you'll both have something to think about, Elena Petrovna said calmly. Now, with your permission, Katya and I would like to be alone. Pasha stood there, opening and closing his mouth like a fish out of water. His shoulders slumped, and a shadow of despair flickered in his eyes. Katya, please, he took a step toward his wife. Let's talk this through. I see now I was wrong. Then respect my decision, Katya said quietly. I need time, Pasha. Goo. Kolya grew impatient, shifting from foot to foot by the door. Pasha, why are you acting like a child? Let's just go. Who cares if a woman's upset? Shut up, Pasha snapped suddenly, whirling sharply toward his brother. It's all your fault, my fault, Kolya complained. I asked you to help me, not to get divorced. No one's getting divorced yet, Elena Petrovna said wearily. Katie just needs time. If you don't give her that, then we'll talk about divorce. Pasha nodded slowly. His face reflected the expression of someone who had just grasped the gravity of the situation. Fine, he said, raising his hands in surrender. I get it. Time. He walked to the entryway closet and pulled out a backpack. He stuffed a few things inside, a toothbrush, a razor. Then he turned to Katie. I'll call tomorrow. Can I? Katie gave a brief nod. Pasha smiled awkwardly, then turned and headed for the door. Kolya was already impatient on the threshold. Finally, he muttered. Let's go, before Mom's neighbor takes the shower. Pasha cast Katie one last, long look, a mix of resentment, regret, and confusion, then followed his brother out. The door clicked shut with a dull sound, and silence settled over the apartment. Elena Petrovna stepped closer to her daughter and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Katie took a deep breath but held herself together. Everything will be fine, Elena Petrovna said softly. Do you really believe that? Katie lifted her tear-filled eyes to her mother. I know it, Elena Petrovna replied firmly, because you're strong, and today you proved it. They stood in the middle of the room, which just an hour ago had been a battlefield and now felt strangely empty and unfamiliar. Katie stared at the closed door through which her husband had left, trying to understand what she felt, relief or emptiness. You know what I'm thinking? Elena Petrovna asked, stroking her daughter's hair. What? That right now, we could really use some tea with brandy and a long talk, the kind only a mother and daughter can have. Elena Petrovna smiled. Katie gave a weak smile and nodded. For the first time all day, she felt something close to calm. Maybe her life had just taken an unexpected turn, but at least she wasn't alone at this crossroads. For 3 days, Katie moved through a fog, sleeping in fits, waking at every sound. She tossed in bed, listening to the emptiness of the apartment. She turned off her phone to avoid the endless messages from Pasha that started pouring in the next day. I'm sorry, we'll talk, I get it now. Words that meant nothing, or very little. On the 4th day, she took time off from work and went to Zach's. Filing for divorce turned out to be surprisingly simple. No questions, no judgmental looks, just a standard form and a list of required documents. You'll need the marriage certificate, both spouses' passports, and the gas fee payment receipt. If there are children, then the birth certificate. Do you have children? No, Katia shook her head. No children. That makes things easier, the woman nodded. If there are no disputes over assets, the process will take about a month. The application can be filed together or separately. Katia nodded, holding the form in her hands. Together or separately? It seemed someone was giving her a choice that didn't really exist. She had already made her decision. When she got home, her phone showed 7 missed calls from Pasha and 1 voicemail. Her finger hovered over the play button. Will it even be worth hearing something new, Katia? Pasha's voice sounded unusually sober and serious, without his usual syrupy tone. I know I was wrong. I don't even know why I did it. It was probably always easier to give in to Kolya than to argue with him. He's my older brother, you understand. I've been used to obeying him since childhood. But that's no excuse. I shouldn't have put him above you, and I certainly shouldn't have told you to shut up. I'm sorry, I'll wait however long you need before you're ready to talk. Katia deleted the message without listening to the end. Just words. She had seen Pasha bend to his brother many times before, but she never thought it would go this far, that he would choose his brother over his wife. That evening, her mother called. How are you, sweetheart? Elena Petrovna's voice was calm and steady. Fine, Katia sighed. I went to Zach's. I picked up the form. A silence followed. Are you sure? Her mother asked carefully. Maybe you should wait, think it over. What's there to think about? Katia shrugged, though her mother couldn't see her. He made his choice. People make mistakes, Elena Petrovna said softly. Everyone deserves a second chance. You always told me, self-respect can't be bought, but it can be easily lost, Katia reminded her. If I forgive him now, what happens next? He'll think he can walk all over me, that his brother is more important than I am. Maybe it was just a bad day, Elena Petrovna suggested. We all say things we regret later. Mom, Katia felt a lump forming in her throat. You heard how he said, shut your mouth, stay out of men's business. That wasn't a bad day for him. It was my nightmare. Elena Petrovna let out a deep sigh. I understand, daughter. I just don't want you to regret it later. I won't regret it, Katia said firmly. This is the right decision. After the call with her mother, Katia sat in the kitchen for a long time, staring out the window at the city at dusk. The lights in the windows across the street, the silhouettes of people going about their business, the cars passing by, everything seemed distant and unreal. Her life had stopped 4 days ago, when she opened the door to her apartment and saw the mess. A week later, Pasha's former colleague Marina called Katie. Hi, Katie, the voice sounded uneasy. Do you know what happened to Pasha? He hasn't shown up to work for several days and isn't answering calls. We broke up, Katie replied shortly. I don't know where he is or what happened to him. Oh, I'm sorry, Marina apologized. It's just that Maxim Igorovic is hysterical. He says if Pasha doesn't show up tomorrow, he's fired. Katie felt a stab of guilt. She had promised herself not to get involved, but she couldn't let Pasha lose his job because of their breakup. She dialed his number, but it went to voicemail. Pasha, it's Katie, she said after the beep. They called from work. If you don't show up tomorrow, they'll fire you. Just think about it. He didn't call back. The next day, Marina confirmed, Pasha hadn't shown up. Maxim Igorovic was furious. He tore up the employment contract and ordered Pasha to collect his things from the office before the end of the week. What nonsense, Marina sighed. Everything was going so well for him. His career was on the rise. Everyone liked him. What happened, Katie? Katie didn't go into details, just said they had different views on life. But something inside her shrank. Everything was happening too fast. Pasha had lost her, lost his job. Had he sunk so deep into despair? The answer came 3 days later. When the doorbell rang, there stood Pasha, unshaven, with dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled shirt. Hi, his voice was hoarse. Sorry for not calling ahead. I came for the rest of my things. Katie stepped aside silently, letting him into the apartment. He smelled of alcohol but was sober, clear-eyed, movements precise. Thanks for calling about the job, he said as he walked into the room. Though it didn't help in the end. I heard, Katie nodded. I'm sorry. Pasha smiled too broadly. No need. It's my fault. He started gathering his things, a winter coat from the closet, books from the shelf, some documents from the desk drawer. Katie watched, leaning against the doorframe. How are you? She finally asked. Fine. Pasha shrugged. Living with my mom and Kolya. A bit cramped, but bearable. And work? Got hired as a warehouse loader at a hardware store. Not an IT director, obviously, but it pays the bills. Something in his tone, too forced, made Katie frown. And Kolya? Did he find a job? She asked, trying to sound neutral. Kolya, Pasha scoffed. Yeah, he's doing great. Sitting on mom's neck, binge-watching shows, complaining about life. He's planning to start his own business but can't decide what. Bitterness slipped into his voice, and Katie felt a knot in her chest. Something had changed between the brothers. It was obvious. Katie suddenly stopped and looked at him. I understand everything about the divorce. It's fair. I was wrong, and I deserve this. But can we at least stay friends? Katie stared at his gaunt face, his eyes filled with pain, and didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to shout, no, you destroyed everything. Another part wanted to step closer, embrace him, and comfort him. I don't know, Pasha, she said honestly. I don't know yet. He nodded, as if he had expected that answer, and went back to packing his things. When the backpack was full, he zipped it shut and slung it over his shoulder. What is all this? He glanced around the room as if saying goodbye to it. Take care, Katie. She walked him to the door. On the threshold, he turned as if he wanted to say something more, but then simply nodded and left. The door closed with a soft click, and Katie felt a strange relief. It was as if the last thread binding them had finally snapped. The day of the divorce, it was raining. Katie stood in the hallway of Zach's, clutching a folder of documents, watching the raindrops race down the window. Pasha was late, and she began to grow nervous. Had he changed his mind? Decided to contest the divorce? Then she'd have to go to court, dragging it out for months. But he arrived right on time. Minute by minute, in an old suit that now hung loose on him, his hair carefully combed. She hadn't seen him in a month, and in that time, he had aged several years. "Hi," he said. He sat beside her, leaving an empty seat between them. "Have you been here long?" 20 minutes, Katie answered with a shrug. "I wanted to make sure I wasn't late." They sat in silence, watching people pass by. A young couple in wedding attire walked past toward the doors of another hall, where weddings were being held today. The girl nervously adjusted her veil. The boy held her hand firmly. Katie felt a strange mix of envy and pity. "We were like that once," Pasha said, following her gaze. "Remember?" "I remember," Katie nodded. "I was happy that day." Pasha stared into space as if seeing their past. He had thought they had their whole lives ahead of them. "Fedotova couple," a voice called from the registration hall. "Please." They stood at the same time. Out of habit, Pasha reached to help her with her coat but then pulled his hand back as if burned. "Sorry," he murmured. The divorce process turned out to be ridiculously simple and fast. Questions, signatures, stamps. "Do you consider reconciliation impossible?" He nodded. Another signature. "Your marriage is dissolved." The whole thing took less than 10 minutes. A ridiculous amount of time for 5 years of shared life. On the steps outside Zach's, Pasha paused. The rain had stopped, and the puddles now reflected the clear blue sky. "How's it going?" He shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. "There's everything." "There's everything," Katia echoed in reply. "Can I take you somewhere?" "I'm in a colleague's car." "No, thank you," Katia shook her head. "I'm going for a walk." Pasha nodded, understanding this wasn't just the end of the conversation but of everything else. "Take care, Katiusha." He took an uncertain step toward her, as if wanting to hug her goodbye, but changed his mind. "And be happy, you deserve it." He walked away without looking back. Katia watched until his figure disappeared into the crowd. A strange feeling of emptiness and freedom at the same time washed over her. Now she was truly alone for the first time in many years. And that thought no longer frightened her. Katia decided to use the weekend to renovate her apartment. She rearranged the furniture, threw out old things, and bought new curtains, light, semi-transparent, in a soft sky blue. They seemed to fill the room with a fresh sea breeze. She gave the old dresser to the neighbor upstairs, with whom she sometimes exchanged a few words in the elevator. In its place, she bought a new, elegant one with a full-length mirror and plenty of drawers for small items. Exactly the one she'd always dreamed of but never dared to buy. The apartment transformed. Elena Petrovna nodded approvingly when she stopped by for a cup of tea on Saturday afternoon. "Finally, it's all yours." They drank tea in the small kitchen, and Katia told her about her plans for the future, training courses, a possible promotion at work, a trip she'd been putting off. "And Pasha?" Elena Petrovna asked unexpectedly. "I don't know," Katia shrugged. "We don't talk." "Something in Maxim Igorevich shuddered when I told him your story," Elena Petrovna said thoughtfully. "He promised to consider reinstating Pasha at work." "Mom," Katia groaned. "Why do you interfere?" "I'm not interfering," Elena Petrovna replied calmly. "It's just not fair that Pasha lost his job because of his brother's behavior. Yes, he got carried away, but punishment should fit the crime." Katia shook her head but said nothing. Something in her mother's words struck her. Had Pasha's punishment, losing his family, job, and self-respect, really matched his mistake? "Marina said he's working as a mover now," Katia said quietly. "He went back to manual labor." "Good for the character," Elena Petrovna nodded. "But a shame for his career. He was a good specialist." They fell silent, each lost in thought. Outside, darkness settled, and the city lights grew brighter. "Do you remember that day?" Katia asked suddenly. When you came and kicked them off the couch. Elena Petrovna smiled. Of course, how could I forget? That was an important lesson for me, Katia said seriously. You taught me not to let anyone walk all over me. Not even those closest to me, even if it's my own husband. It's an important skill, Elena Petrovna nodded. No less important is knowing how to forgive. Not always and not for everyone, of course, but sometimes people deserve a second chance. Just don't say you're on Pasha's side. Katia raised her eyebrows. I'm always on your side, Elena Petrovna replied softly. Sometimes people make mistakes, and some of them really do change. Pasha won't change, Katia shook her head. He'll always bend to others, to his brother, to circumstances, to anyone. Maybe, said Elena Petrovna. Maybe this experience has made him grow. Who knows? Katia didn't answer, but her mother's words stayed with her. That night, after Elena Petrovna had left, Katia stood by the window, looking out at the city, and thought, where is Pasha now? How is he handling his new life? Has he changed like Mom said? These thoughts were unwelcome, and Katia pushed them away firmly. She had her own life now. A new life where there was no room for Pasha, or his brother. A month later, on her way back from work, Katia spotted a familiar figure by her building's entrance. Pasha was leaning against a tree, watching her windows. In his hands was a bouquet, wildflowers, not roses like the ones he used to give for anniversaries. Katia could have turned around and taken another path to avoid him. Instead, she straightened her back and walked straight to the entrance. Hello, Pasha straightened up when he saw her. I wasn't sure if you were home or not. Hi. Katia stopped a few steps away. What are you doing here? I wanted to see you. He held out the bouquet. And say a proper goodbye. Goodbye? Katia frowned, taking the flowers automatically. Yeah, Pasha nodded, I'm leaving for St. Petersburg. Got a job at an IT company. Congratulations, Katia said sincerely. That's great. Thanks. He shifted awkwardly. Igorovic gave me a recommendation letter. Said I'm a good specialist, just got caught in a tough spot. I'm happy for you. Katia didn't know what else to say. What about Kolya? Pasha smiled, Kolya's staying with Mom. He's doing fine. You had a falling out. Katia couldn't hide her surprise. Not exactly. Pasha shrugged. I just realized I don't have to carry him my whole life. That I can love my brother but not let him ruin mine. Katia felt a strange satisfaction. So when do you leave? Pasha checked his watch. Train's at 9:20. They stood in silence, unsure what else to say. So many years of marriage, so many words left unspoken. Good luck, Katia finally said. I hope everything works out in St. Petersburg. Thanks. Pasha nodded, she smiled with that genuine smile that once made his heart beat faster. You look happy, Katia. That's the main thing. She hesitated. Yes, I guess I am happy. In my own way. He nodded, as if he had received the answer to an unasked question, and took a step back. Well, I'll be going, then. I have a lot to do before I leave. Of course. Katia hugged the bouquet to her chest. Thank you for the flowers. Pasha waved his hand and walked away without looking back. Katia watched him go, feeling a strange lightness, as if she had finally been freed from a weight. Now she was free, not just legally, but emotionally, too. She went up to her apartment, placed the flowers in a vase, and walked over to her new dressing table. In the mirror, she saw a different Katia, self-assured, calm, a little more mature. A woman who knew her worth and wouldn't let anyone, not even those closest to her, tell her how to live. She smiled at her reflection. A new life was beginning. And in it, there was no room for Pasha or his brother, only for herself and the endless possibilities ahead. The following Saturday, Elena Petrovna came to her daughter's house for tea. They sat at the table, and Katya told her about her meeting with Pasha and his departure for St. Petersburg. You know what's the strangest thing? Katya mused, stirring her tea. I'm happy for him. Really? It seems he finally grew up. Sometimes, people need to lose something important to understand its value, Elena Petrovna agreed. And sometimes, it changes them for the better. But it's already too late, Katya added quietly. For the two of you, maybe, Elena Petrovna conceded, but not for him. And not for you. They sat by the window, watching as the last rays of sunlight painted the rooftops gold. The house smelled of freshly brewed tea and wildflowers, still sitting in the vase. I'm proud of you, daughter, Elena Petrovna said unexpectedly, covering Katya's hand with her own. You've become a strong woman, just as I always hoped you would be. Katya smiled, feeling her eyes well up with tears, not bitter ones, but bright and cleansing. Thank you, Mom, she whispered. For everything. For the apartment, for your support, and for teaching me not to let anyone walk over me, not even my own husband. They laughed, remembering that day when men's affairs had crashed against the determination of women. A day that changed their lives forever. Outside, night was falling, lights flickering on in the neighboring buildings, where their own lives unfolded, with their dramas, joys, and lessons. And in the small, cozy home, decorated to its owner's taste, two women drank tea and talked about the future. A future that now belonged to them alone.